Hello and welcome to the EDRM Global Webinar channel. My name is Mary Mack and I'm the CEO and Chief Legal Technologist for EDRM. Today's remote offerings webinar is the step towards effective and reliable language services for global litigation. It's sponsored by our wonderful partner, Divergent Language Solutions. Our faculty experts today are Virginia Weeks, the IP Litigation Paralegal Manager at Wolf Greenfield, and Brandon Carney, founder and CEO of Divergent. As always, we welcome your questions and feedback in the console. All questions are anonymous. The webinar itself will be recorded and available for your replay at your convenience 24/7. We are very grateful you are spending time with us during these challenging times, and EDRM is augmenting our substantive webinars with practical ones like this one to support our community as we adapt. Let me tell you a little bit about our presenters, our expert presenters today. We have with us Virginia Weeks. Virginia has been managing paralegals for over a decade. Now at Wolf, Virginia hails from Duane Morris and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as part of her experience. And Brandon Carney. Brandon, decades and a half hands-on experience with language translation, provides the foundation for the company he founded, Divergent Language Solutions, our wonderful EDRM partner, which is now in its 8th year of serving our community. And without further ado, Brandon, please take us through.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate the introduction. Good morning to everybody. So let's just get started here. Just a quick little bit about Divergent and kind of myself, my journey through the translation industry to date. Divergent was founded in 2012. We currently have offices in New York, California, and Hawaii. In that time, we've been around for about 8 years. We have been fortunate enough to amass a client list of approximately 90% of the Am Law 100. Some large Fortune 5, 10 companies as well. We provide foreign language assistance in over 100 languages with the capability of 240 plus languages, I believe. We really focus on high quality translation work for large scale litigation arbitration matters, and seek to be a partner with our clients and not just a vendor, and really work with them as part of their team, as an augmentation and an extension of their teams. We have received a couple of accolades over the years, which I'm quite proud of. Most recently in 2019, we were recognized by the Common Sense Advisory as one of the largest by revenue legal translation firms in the marketplace. I myself have started in the translation world in 2004 after deciding ultimately not to go to law school, and I found myself studying Spanish, and then I ended up in the translation or the legal space of the translation industry, and I was off and running. So enough about me. We'll move to the next slide here, and this is kind of speaks to our journey together here with Wolf Greenfield, and I'll let Virginia say a word about this as well.
Hi, I'm Virginia Weeks, and I'm happy to be here this morning. I hope everyone's having a good week. Just a little additional background to add on to what Mary said. I've been a litigation paralegal for over 27 years. I joined Wolf Greenfield and Sachs about 7 years ago as their IP Litigation Paralegal Manager, and I manage a small team of IP litigation paralegals who support approximately 24 litigators as well as practitioners in the firm's post-grant group, which handles inter-part review proceedings, interferences, and other post-grant challenges before the Patent Trial Appeal Board. Just a little bit about Wolf Greenfield. Wolf Greenfield was founded in 1927, and it is probably the largest Boston law firm that is focused exclusively on intellectual property law. Wolf Greenfield opened a small New York City office in September of 2016, which is continuing to grow. While we're considered a mid-sized law firm, we have about 140 legal practitioners and around, I'd say, over 200 support staff. Our clients range from individuals to small startups to Fortune 500 companies, including global corporations, renowned universities, and research institutions. 90% of our firm's practitioners, which are attorneys and technical specialists, have science or engineering degrees, and about 2/3 of those hold advanced degrees such as a MS, PhD, or MD. Our core practice groups range from biotechnology, chemical material technologies, electrical and computer technologies, pharmaceutical, some transactional work, patent, copyright, and trademark. And myself and my team of paralegals primarily support the litigation and post-grant groups. We don't typically support the prosecution side of the firm. Our practice includes pro bono work, arbitrations, federal district court actions, as well as cases before the ITC and the Patent Trial Appeal Board. We also handle some state court actions that typically involve disputes centered around theft of trade secrets or licensing disputes. Our clients have offices around the world, and my team and I are involved in many cases that include the need to translate documents to English from multiple languages for use in proceedings within the United States. And that led to our long relationship with Divergent, which has been quite successful, and we're happy to be here today to share our experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Virginia. And yeah, just a little bit further about our relationship with Wolf Greenfield. We've been working together since 2016, just under 300 projects completed with 11 different unique language pairs. So we certainly, Virginia and her team has certainly put us through the paces, but it has been a pleasure. I wish all of our clients were as organized and as on point as Virginia and her team. So let's just dive right in here. Talking about, we're going to look at obviously kind of how you suss out a good language service provider. What are the important parts to look for, and just very high level. And this might seem obvious, but there's a theme that I think will emerge from here is in that nothing is ever the same in our world. And so if you keep that in the back of your head, then, a fundamental foundational level of transparency and really solid open communication with this type of relationship is paramount. If when every single project that we work on together is truly different, to be able to have that collaboration and, communication and just that be the bedrock of the relationship, has proven to be worth its weight in gold, over time. Whether you're talking about setting deadlines or just, how can we get you to your goal, as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. Virginia, do you want to share a little bit in terms of how that plays out on your end, and maybe even internally from your end as well?
Sure. I want to reiterate what Brandon just said about transparency. I think communication is really the key, and understanding the process, understanding that there's multiple steps involved, and really setting very clear expectations from the start. For one example is that when you're requesting a translation, there's a lot more involved than just receiving that translation back. You have to understand on both sides what each company has to go through and what the end game is. For example, a translation, and Brandon will speak more about this, is not only involves providing you the document in the language that you need it in, there's also a proofreading aspect and a quality management aspect. And so you want to make sure that when you're working with your teams that you're communicating around that, and that you're setting these realistic deadlines that Brandon mentioned, and that you're not over asking. And that's really a two-way street, because you don't want to set your vendor up for failure, and your vendor doesn't want to set the client up for failure.
Absolutely.
Brandon, did you want me to? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, that's I mean, I think that's a great kind of, place to start, right? And because we're always being pushed, right? The things that we need, or the things that our clients need, are usually last minute, a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, and that's our business. That is where we excel, in providing high quality services fast, because as anyone that's familiar with the legal world knows, is it's a 24/7 gig, and so in order to facilitate that, if you're constantly getting tripped up with communication errors or instruction errors, or it's just not going to be a sustainable working relationship for what is needed, and so that's those things are all, as I mentioned, paramount. Let's go here to the next slide. So yeah, this is, I think Virginia might be able to talk a little bit here about the process that you undertook when searching for and vetting language service providers, and then I can kind of augment her comments here with a little bit about how we do it, because they're intertwined. So Virginia, do you want to start in terms of how your process when you were searching for a vendor?
Sure. I think it'll be really important for anyone who's looking to bring on a new language service provider to first take a step back and drill down into what your particular needs are. What type of group are you working with? What type of language services do you think you'll need? Are there a variety of languages? Is it going to be a single language? You really have to examine internally within your company what your goal is. For example, you might be supporting a litigation group, or you might be supporting a patent prosecution group, or you could be in a different line of business where you're translating documents for regulatory purposes or something of that nature. And those things you need to consider as you make your selection, because you want to align yourself with a provider who's going to be specialized in that industry. That's going to have the knowledge, the technology, the particular formatting skills, if you have a lot of graphics and design within your documents. And you really have to vet that out in advance. And as you talk to the LSP vendors, which I recommend that you interview more than one. Typically, people recommend interviewing at least 3 vendors whenever you're going out to search for a new relationship. Take some time to look at their history. How long have they been in business? What type of work have they performed? Ask them about the volume that they've had to turn around. Ask them about workflow, the responsiveness, availability. Are they in the same time zone? Are they going to be able to meet your requests if you're working after hours and you need something? Ask them about how they allocate their project managers. Do you have a single point of contact, for example? Could you set up a distribution email that goes to the key group that you'll be working with? You'll want to explore the pricing options. How do they charge? Are there extra fees for rush jobs, holidays, or weekends? You'll want to talk about their ability, and I touched on this a little bit already, but their ability to translate complex documents. If your business involves large Excel files, those require a particular skill set in handling, and often there's formulas or hidden text, and you want to make sure that you're capturing all the relevant information. You'll also want to ask questions about the types of translations, and Brandon will get into this later. For example, there are human translations, there's machine translations, there's certified and non-certified, and those are the types of things you'll want to talk through at length with your service providers as you're looking to make decisions about who's going to be the best fit. You also want to talk about how your vendor provides estimates for the work so that you have an idea of what the project is going to cost at the start, and you'll want to set up a system for that. And I like to hear, and I'll have Brandon share with you a little bit that he told us about his linguistics and their qualifications and how they work together, because that's very important. And also the types of technology that they can implement that might assist with the translation process. I would also recommend considering having your language service provider do a test translation before you make a commitment, get a sense of the workflow and the relationship. You should also take into consideration your language service provider's data security information and their methods of file transfer to ensure that your clients' or corporation's data is protected. And of course, it's always good to ask for lists of references and learn from other people what their experiences have been. And I think Brandon was going to touch a little bit more on what actually makes a good translator and answer some of the questions about what he, share with you what he told me about his relationship with his linguist.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Virginia. So, to kind of piggyback on that, I mean, again, as we can see, there's so many different, little nuances to everything, whether we're talking language, document types, source material, certification requirements, all sorts of things here. And so, again, I mean, it might seem a little obvious, but going back to the communication and just really a culture of open and transparent communication is really what we try to foster. And so, when Virginia's talking about testing an LSP, much like we test our translators, you're testing for quality, obviously, but you're also testing for kind of the intangibles. Are they? Let me advance this slide here. So some of this stuff here on the slide says what makes a good linguist, but also, Divergent is, by and large, a function of the linguists that we work with. Obviously we have our internal process and things like that, but, I was a Spanish major in college. I studied Spanish my entire academic career, but I am in no way, shape, or form qualified to translate anything. We work with linguists who have a JD, an MBA, a PhD, some combination thereof. They've been doing this for 25 years. They founded the translation department at the World Bank, or they ran the translation department at Hitachi for 20 years. When we're testing these folks, obviously you want to have the credentials and the translation capability, but you're also testing, the language element is probably 45% of the equation. You could be the best translator in the world, but if every single project you work on, you send in a day late and you aren't responsive, or if you're part of a team working on a large volume set and you don't really play well together with everybody else, you're useless, really. And so there's much more than just, hey, can you sit down and translate this document accordingly? Because there are so many demands, look, the legal space is a very demanding one. We are a 24/7, 365 shop. I can't tell you how many days, how many Christmases over the past 15 years where I've been, typing away on my keyboard on Christmas morning with my family screaming at me over my shoulder. But, that is what it is. And so you really want to make sure that the folks that you're working with specialize. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a generalist. And, we don't get, with our clientele and the types of matters that we work on, we don't get a chance. We don't get a second chance. If we mess something up, they're gone and probably never to be heard from again. So, everything that we do, all of our systems and processes that are in place have been formulated and created to work with attorneys and support staff within law firms and corporate legal departments. And so going back to testing an LSP and then in turn the LSP testing their linguists, right? You're looking at specialization, obviously the language skills. A huge part of translation, no one person can know everything. I don't care if you have 4 PhDs, and so there's a level of research that goes into creating a solid quality final product. And so, if the research skills aren't there, then that's, you might not be the best fit for the work that we do. Again, I mentioned communication. If the client says at the last minute, hey, we have an update to this document that you're working on, we need to be able to communicate that to the teams working on it. And if the linguist just kind of goes AWOL until the deadline, that's not good. So, communication, reachability, obviously timeliness. Again, you could be the best translator in the world, but if I know you're going to be late every single time, then that's not going to work. And then that plays well with others. Again, a lot of times we get into situations, very high volume situations that are needed very quickly. To put that in some perspective, the average professional translator translates approximately 3,000 words a day. And if you call the average page 250 words. But, a project that comes to mind, and there's another project in here that I'll go over, but, not that long ago, we did approximately 500,000 words, so 500,000 words in just under 72 hours. So you can begin to see how all of these things that we're talking about, when you compress what normally would be at a standard rate, months of work into literally hours, if all of those previous things that we're talking about, communication, reachability, play nice with others, if those aren't in place when those types of projects come up, you're not going to be able to do it. You won't have the horses to do it. And so these are the things that we're testing, and it's a very high pressure world in which we live, but it's also, if you do it well, there's quite frankly just a lot of opportunity there to be a partner and to be really just a super solid consultant and a part of an extension of your client's team.
If I could chime in for a second, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just stressing that being an extension of our team has been really important. Our firm in particular, we handle cases that have a lot of really complex language, getting back to your point about specialization, complex biomedical, pharmaceutical language, symbols, chemical compounds. These are not things that the average person who happens to be fluent in another language would necessarily know. So I think, Brandon, if you could talk a little bit about, being strong not only in the language of the document that you're seeking to translate, but also the target language.
Absolutely. So, that's a good point. And when you start talking or going back to quality, so when there are certain things I kind of rattled off before about what we look for in a linguist, but the rule of thumb is we only work with translators who translate into their native language. And so if we're translating into German, German native. If we're translating into Spanish, Spanish native. If someone tells you that they're native in 3 different languages, they're lying, because one of them will be better than the others. There are exceptions to every rule. I can think of 2 people that in my 15 years of doing this that I have ever trusted to translate in both directions. And they are, they're the unicorns. But the rule of thumb is you translate into your native language. And, and a lot of shops out there, very candidly, will not take that approach. Will, send it to whoever puts their hand in the air. And that's, when we get into kind of the technology that exists in our space, that starts to get into some of the problematic areas. Well, if we try and automate everything, well, the first person who puts their hand in the air could take the job, and you have no control over who's actually doing it. Our job internally, in addition to quality control and things like that Virginia mentioned, is really our number one charge is to make sure that we are assigning our clients' documents to the proper resources. So, if it's a patent, it needs to go to someone who has experience with patents. If it's pharmaceutical, obviously someone with maybe a PhD or maybe an MD. If it's financial, someone with an MBA, and kind of right on down the line. So that specialization is hugely important, coming at everything from the quality angle. It's not just a matter of throwing a body that speaks another language at the problem, as it were. Okay, so thank you, Virginia. That's a great point that I glanced over there. So let's go to the next slide here. So yeah, as I've mentioned before, right? Not every project is different. We don't make pens, and we're just out there trying to sell as many pens as we can. Every single thing that we do is different and really requires us to sit down with our client up front and say, okay, talk to me. What is your problem, right? And how is language a part of that? The easiest example is just, I have a document that's in German, right? And then we need that translated. But we also provide interpreting. We provide on-site document review. We, indexing. We can provide summaries. It's really, there is nothing standard. So, okay, let's just sit down and understand how we can assist you here, and then formulate a game plan to really get you, like I said before, to your goal line as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. So, one I believe the case study here is, so a little case study that shows kind of the varying range of content, and this is a really great example of just a super high volume. This is, in my 15 years, the largest project that I've ever handled, and quite frankly, the largest project that I've ever actually seen materialize that I was a part of. So what this was here, and this will show you kind of quality, specialization, volume, ability to build a team, and the things that we do to ensure consistency and all that good stuff. So client came to us. They said they had an online encyclopedia of healthcare content. Basically, it was a competitor to WebMD. So I'm sure most folks are familiar with WebMD. Very same principle. They had all of this content. It was an encyclopedia, and they needed it translated into 15 languages officially, to be translated into 15 languages, which, a massive amount there. And so this is different than, hey, we have 20 million words in Japanese that we need into English. That's all one team. This was into 15 languages, which means that we had 15 separate teams. Each team had translators, had editors, had specialists. I think there was like either a doctor or an RN was a part of each team. So this is a massive undertaking. It's like turning a battleship here. And so, we we eventually we danced for 3 months, and eventually they pulled the trigger, and we got going immediately. And we had, you know, hundreds of linguists on this and internal staff. You know, what's it, 26,000 documents. So think of it this way: there's 26,000 individual documents that had to be translated into 15 languages, and each one of those documents had to go through probably a 4 to 5 step process. So just think about that for a second in terms of just logistics of keeping that all, you know, just keeping it all organized and keeping it moving and keeping, you know, it's a Herculean task. Another thing, you know, we localized the English even for use in the UK. So while that's not translation, obviously British English is a bit different. So that was something that we did with this project. You know, and when all was said and done, this went off without a hitch. We absolutely, as humbly as I can say it, you know, we knocked it out of the park. And you know, I ended up being invited to the client's wedding after all of this was over. And we also, given the specialization that we had within, you know, each individual team, we were effectively proofreading the English too. So there was plenty of occasions where we would go back to the client and say, hey, actually, you know, this statement here is incorrect, like medically incorrect. And so that was kind of a value add that, you know, we didn't charge for or anything like that. That kind of all flows downhill from the specialization of the team and everybody involved, which the client was over the moon about. The client actually told me after everything was done, when he said, when it all started, I thought this was the Titanic and the only thing I could do was circle the lifeboats. But again, it went off without a hitch. And the interesting thing here too is that they had spent thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on getting all of this content machine translated because they thought that was the way to go. And all of that content they got back and they realized that it was next to useless. So it literally just sat on their servers, and then they had to go spend millions of dollars to, I mean, this was approximately a $5 million project, to go have this all done again. So, you know, technology in a world in which we can hit a button on our phone and get anything we want immediately, you know, technology is not always going to be the answer, at least in our world, which is a bit contra to, you know, kind of present day mentality. So that was
chime in there, Brandon, about
Absolutely.
the machine translation. I think that's a really good point. We've had similar experiences where we've had attorneys ask our staff to provide machine translations, and people don't always appreciate the nuances of how language is translated, and that it's not a straight word-for-word translation, particularly if you're dealing with an Asian language, Chinese, Japanese, or Korean. The words aren't one for one.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. You know, a lot of what we do in our sales process is, you know, we're not a used car salesman. Like normally, if you have translation needs in your practice, it's a rather frequent occurrence, and so, you know, we try to sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. What was I saying there, Virginia? I apologize. Totally went off the rails.
I know it's that, you know, dealing with machine translation, it's not a one-for-one, so teams have to be very careful.
That's right. So yeah, what I was saying is our sales process is more about education, less about kind of, hey, what can we do to put you in this new translation today? It's, okay, let me try and tell you what are the limitations here, what we can do, what, you know, oh, you have 10 million documents. Okay, well, that's going to be cost prohibitive to translate those in full. But, you know, if you hit them with a machine, maybe you do some keyword searches or some other things to really kind of funnel those 10 million documents down to, 100,000 or 10,000 hot docs that are, very pertinent to your case, and then you have those translated by human translation. As Virginia said, the MT output, while it certainly has gotten better in recent years, it's still far from being able to replicate, that of an extremely qualified, highly educated human. And then you start talking about, I think this is actually on the next slide here. So there's machine translation. So we talk a couple things, talk a little bit about kind of some ways that we can do cost savings. I'll just keep going with machine translation here. I mentioned that if you have large volumes, obviously that's a great use case. If you have, a straightforward, 10-page Word document that's in Spanish, that might not, that's definitely going to give you a better output than a scan of a Japanese patent. It's the source material in our world, in the legal world. As much as I would love to say that we just receive these shiny, beautiful live documents all the time, we really deal in mostly, dead text PDFs that may have, in Virginia's case, most of the work that we do with them, or the lion's share is Japanese to English, which is, and it's patent work. So there's schematics, there's all sorts of formatting, and when we give you a translation back, it is going to look identical to the source material, with the exception of it's going to be in a foreign language, or I'm sorry, in the target language, whatever that is, be that English or any other language. So these are all considerations, that you have to use. And so going back to the MT, if we were to have a PDF of a Japanese patent, well, we would first have to OCR that. I'm sure everybody here has had some interaction with OCR software. Some works better than others, but it's also not perfect, and especially on Asian characters, it gets even worse. And so, okay, we have an OCR doc that didn't OCR perfectly, and then you put it through the machine. Outside of just the technology, if the format itself is not in a usable format, then garbage in, garbage out is essentially what you're going to do get there. And so when we hear people say, when we have clients ask us for MT, we say absolutely, we provide that, we can provide that. Let's talk about what your end use is here, because that might not be the best. What's your goal? That might not be the best way to get to your goal, and it's just. Again, it's in present day society or world where, technology, right? And so a lot of people just kind of, if they're not intimately familiar with translation and all that goes into it, kind of default to Google Translate, right? That's the biggest one. Google Translate, don't ever put anything confidential or privileged in there. They own it. But also just the technology, it's not there. But that said, I was speaking at a conference in Tokyo in December, and the day I got there, I found myself at the bar with an older Japanese man dressed to the nines. He was slugging back his whiskey and started chatting me up, and I do not speak a lick of Japanese. And so, I pulled out Google Translate on my phone, and we sat there and had a very interesting conversation. Perfect use case, right? So you have to just really evaluate what it is that you're doing and what is your goal, and then you kind of let that guide you and dictate what resource you bring to bear there.
Can I chime in there as well, Brandon?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That reminds me of another example that I'd like to remind people of if you're working in the litigation world. I've had people question why the foreign language reviewers within their document review systems can't also translate the document. And I just wanted to point out that there, just like Brandon was using the example of Google Translate in a conversation, there's a big difference between being able to read a document and identify its importance to a matter and then actually translating it. And so those aren't necessarily going to be the same person.
That's right. And you know, another good distinction to be made, similar distinction to be made, is interpreting. Right? Interpreting is the spoken word. Translation is the written word. And you know, while there are certainly translators who interpret and interpreters who translate, they are very, very distinctly different skill sets. And so you're not going to get the same person, just like as Virginia mentioned, right? Like you might have an absolute rock star of a reviewer, but they might not be the best translator, and that's okay, right? That's what we're talking about here, is bringing specific skill sets to bear and knowing when to do that and how to do that in a organized fashion. And so it's, you know, there was a push for a while, and still is in some ways, you know, to kind of commoditize the word, right? It's just words. We can put it through a black box and it'll spit it out, you know, and it's not that simple. It just really isn't that simple. And, you know, so there's all these different nuances and things that you have to take into consideration. That's machine translation. Just talk about a couple of other cost-saving measures that we can, you know, kind of tools in our quiver, if you will. I mentioned a couple of these previously when I was talking about, you know, really sitting down initially and saying, okay, what's going on? What do you need? How can we help you? And kind of the consultative approach. You know, a lot of times we'll get hooked into these large projects, large litigations where, you know, there'll be thousands and thousands of documents, whether that be all at once or whether that be over time. You know, I know this is something that we've had to navigate with Virginia's team over time, is the deduping. You know, if someone says, here's 2 terabytes worth of documents, go for it. You know, that's obviously a little bit easier, where we would spend some hours, get a team to review the documents and literally just pull the documents, the duplicates apart, or separate them, I should say. And sometimes even, you know, we'll get a volume of content that has been, you know, quote unquote, deduped by some sort of analytics tool or something along those lines, and we'll still find duplicate docs in there. So, you know, it's really, and as we build these teams, as we're working on a matter, let's say just use Virginia as the easy example here for her team, you know, we're always going to endeavor to place the same content with the same linguists. They become familiar with the content. They become familiar with the client's expectations of style and formatting, and it just makes the whole process more efficient. But they also, over time, can say, hey, wait, you know what? I'm pretty sure I've already translated this, or I saw this as a reference document last week or last month, and really be able to say, hey, look, here's a 10,000 word document that otherwise would have cost, you know, $2,000 or whatever, that, you know, we can set this one aside. And you know, Virginia, I believe you guys also have an internal policy in terms of how you guys send stuff out and screen for duplicates and things like that. Do you want to say a word about how that works from your end?
Sure. I'm really proud of my team internally for helping to establish some really good best practices that have, I think, also led to some cost-saving measures. And I recommend that other people think about doing that within your own groups. We held a litigation group interdepartmental training session where we educated everybody on the process and set up some best practices internally, which included creating a template within Outlook. You can, using the office.com features within Outlook, you can create template emails, and they go into a library within Outlook that people can just click on, and it'll auto-populate certain fields in their email, and they can fill in the information. And so using that template has cut down on the back and forth between Divergent and our firm, because we've got the questions that we typically would get back already answered when we make our order. So the cost saving starts at the beginning, really, and also tracking and establishing, you know, if you're working with a large team and by chance 2 different people on the team might be looking at the same document but not know that the other one is. So if you have your own internal indexing and tracking systems, you can also leverage that to reduce duplicates even before it gets to your language service provider. And, you know, keeping track of the titles of the documents, we do it in a simple Excel spreadsheet, and you can set fields that'll it'll alert you if you have a duplicate entry based on different information. It could be the date of the document, it could be a Bates number. So I recommend really trying to get ahead of that on the client side.
And just to reiterate there, and I'm not just saying this because Virginia's on the line. I mean, I've said it a couple of times. You know, Virginia and her team really are, in 15 years, you know, some of the most organized counterparties I've ever worked with, and I really do wish that all of our clients were as structured and organized as Virginia and her team, because it just makes the whole process smoother. It makes the whole relationship just, you know, run like a well-oiled machine, and it's really worth taking that time up front to kind of set that groundwork to ensure kind of long-term success. And to Virginia, I mean, Virginia said, you know, you use a simple Excel, but I mean, I will say, you know, this isn't rocket science from my end, right? We're not. I wish I could say that I'm a well-accomplished brain surgeon, but you know, I'm not. And it's really about being super organized, hyper organized, and just on point and communicative, and just being a really good consultant. Because at the end of the day, again, you know, we are facilitating a process. The linguists are the ones that are doing the heavy lift in terms of the actual translation, converting the text from source to target, and we're in the middle there, kind of cracking the whip, orchestrating things, and so it just really is about kind of being on your game, and making sure that, you know, those 26,000 documents that each have to go through a 5-step process for 15 different languages. I mean, if you do that math out, it can make you go cross-eyed a little bit, but you get some understanding of the breadth of what these projects can look like. You know, and another back to the cost-saving measures here, the indexing. You know, we can do it, and that's really kind of indexing / summarization. You know, you have 100 documents, 1,000 documents, whatever the case may be, that maybe, you know, okay, we'd like to have a linguist go through and create an index and say, all right, Bates number XYZ, let's give 2 sentences about that doc, and you just make a table, right? And then from that, teams can say, okay, I want to dig deeper on, you know, documents 1, 2, 3, or let's translate these in full, or let's just translate the claims here, or whatever the case may be. But it's just a way to kind of focus, right, so that we're not just haphazardly translating, you know, everything under the sun, looking for that needle in a haystack. The same is true, kind of leveraging duplicate text. You know, it's less present when we're translating patents, because patents are inherently, you know, a patent is going to be about itself, and they're not necessarily going to share text. But a lot of times, you know, we're working on a case right now out of Germany that has a number of different angles to it, and so, you know, we've translated just this past week actually a couple of complaints. Well, those complaints have been about 15,000 words apiece, but, you know, call it 2,000 to 3,000 words they overlap, they're duplicate. So obviously we want to make sure that in a perfect world, you want the same person to translate all of that. If the client can allow us the time needed to undertake that. This particular client had desired deadlines, and we said to them, we said, hey, look, we can 100% hit your deadline. we would have to split this up. What we would recommend, and it would cost you more. What we would recommend, if you can, find an extra day or two, we can actually get this with the same team, the same person. So, consistency will be the same across all documents. Obviously, the duplicate text will be leveraged and only will be charged for one time, not, every time it occurs. So there's a number of ways in which you benefit if you are to do that. Obviously, the most obvious is consistency, and then secondarily would be the cost.
Right. I mean, I think, again, it goes back to that communication and like I said earlier, really knowing what your end game is.
That's right. So the next thing I want to talk about is certifications, because this is some murky water in my world. So what is a certified translation? Part of me wants to say not much, because what it used to be was that Divergent would produce a certification that says, to the best of my knowledge and belief, document XYZ is a true and accurate translation from Japanese into English, signed by a member of our staff internally, not the translator, and then notarized. And for years that was the industry standard, and it was kind of not questioned. You have to keep in mind that our industry is relatively new, and so this is still kind of ever evolving. Present day, as the world is getting flatter and borders are dropping and global business and all of that, there are more laws around these things and more requirements depending on where you are. Case in point, Virginia mentioned it. We had to work with her team up front and we have a number of clients that their certification requirements are just different. And I think Virginia can maybe say a little, Virginia, do you want to say a little bit about kind of that process from your end?
Well, in terms of the certifications, we needed different certifications for litigation versus filings with the Patent Trial Appeal Board, because the inter-part review filings require certifications under Section 1001 of Title 18 of the U.S. Code. And so part of our template that I mentioned earlier, when we email Divergent to ask for work, we identify up front what type of certification we're looking for, or what type of translation. So it could be just a preliminary information translation, but then if we actually want a certification, we'll specify which one we want. And we worked with Brandon to have that language, the language that would be required in a template on his end, so that he knows exactly what the wording should be, so that we won't have a problem with it down the road when we need to go use it in proceeding. Right, and so,
I mentioned kind of what certification used to look like, and present day it's changed a bit. Now we offer we have kind of 3 standard certification options, and then again, if the client needs anything outside of that, we will 100% work with them to kind of understand those needs and create a solution around that. But now we offer our standard certification, which is the one that I described, then what we call like a translator affidavit, which is the actual translator who signs an affidavit stating, their credentials, potentially, the document that they translate, a language pair, and just kind of an attestation that that they are standing behind their work. Sometimes we offer, sometimes the client will want both, a statement from us and a statement from the actual linguist. Sometimes they want them notarized, sometimes they don't. Sometimes, so there's all these different options, and so it's really just about what's needed by the client.
Right.
So that is kind of that is kind of certification for actual translations. What a lot of times people will say, I need a certified translator, but so that's not really a thing. There are certain bodies out there that do provide certifications. The simplest to use is the ATA, which is the American Translator Association. But it's a very general test that they give, and they even state it as such, as a general test. And so, you can go get certified and certified this and certified that, but to be honest, some of the best linguists that we work with have 0 certifications. They've been doing this for 30 years. They don't need a certification. If you're fresh out of school, it might make sense to go get some credentials and really, say, hey, look, I'm up to snuff here. But a lot of times we will have to counsel our clients and say, look, by having this requirement, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot, because you're disqualifying, what would be our probably choices 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because they don't have an ATA certification or something along those lines. Where you can get a certification is as an interpreter, the spoken word interpreting, and that's going to be, federally or state certified. And not every state offers certification. Not every state that offers certification offers it in every language. I think, for instance, in California, I don't know if I'm going to get this 100% right because it's been a while since I looked at it, but I think the state of California only offers certification in, I want to say, Spanish, Chinese, and Navajo, something strange like that. So it's not, that is to say that the federal government and state governments do not automatically, by default, offer certification in every single language. So it's really, again, just kind of exemplary of I guess the youth of our industry, and kind of the ever evolving industry that we are in. And certifications really, they're one of those things that are kind of constantly in flux, along with other things in our industry. Let's see. I know we're getting towards the end here, so I'll wrap it up. Notarized and certified, most certifications are going to be notarized in some shape or form. So there's no real difference there. It's just a matter of whether it's a requirement. And then common uses, submitted to court as evidence, or, as Virginia mentioned, I believe it's Section 1001 of Title 18. It really, again, it just all depends on what your end use is, and how we can get you there. All right, and so just key points to remember here, just to land the plane. Again, clear, consistent, two-way communication from the get-go. You got to go at these things full open kimono, and otherwise it'll come back to haunt you. You really have to have, and that can be challenging for us, especially working in the legal world where it's high pressure. People want things perfect. They want it yesterday at half cost. So again, it might sound obvious, but it does take some tact to be able to kind of set that up, and almost, sometimes we have to demand it a little bit, and that can be challenging with attorneys and litigation support staff. But if we are successful in kind of pushing that ball forward, everyone will benefit over time, and quite frankly, cost as well. And then really, choose an LSP that specializes in what they do. If you go to a generalist, you don't want a marketing translation agency to be translating patents, and vice versa. And so it's really about the specialization and how company XYZ brings their resources to bear, and to really get you what you need and get you across the goal line. So, Virginia, do you want to add any closing thoughts there?
I guess my closing recommendation would be just to drive home the need for having solid procedures that will build this reliable and trusting relationship between the LSP and the client. It's immensely important because, as you mentioned, usually this work needs to be done within some deadlines. So you want to have all of that groundwork laid in order to meet those goals.
Absolutely. Well, I will cut it there. I just want to say thank you very much to EDRM and to Virginia for joining us, and for everybody else that is listening. Certainly appreciate your time, and I think we have some time for a couple of questions, but I will toss it back to Ms. Mary Mack.
Well, thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Virginia. Question for either one of you, actually. Using machine translation, does that accelerate the translation process, or does that get in the way of a translator? Do they just go from scratch on a document after you've done data reduction, as you described?
Right. So what you're referring to is what is kind of coming to be known as post-editing. And that is a whole ball of wax in its own right, where basically you hit it with MT and then you edit it. But so for all the reasons that I mentioned before, right, like you're only going to be as good as your source material. So in some worlds, right, where maybe it's marketing copy or something that is, a technical manual that is very static, very similar over time, where you can get a kind of a at least a good enough output and then hit it with editing. That said, that end product will never, ever be as good as if it is translated from scratch by a human who is qualified to do so. There's even been I just saw this a study recently, just a couple weeks ago, where a new language, if you will, is developing out of post-editing, called post-editing ease or something like that is what they called it, basically meaning that this unintended consequence of, clearly seeing that this was post-edited. So again, look, there are tools out there that are useful and beneficial in the right circumstances. But that is, it's not a situation where it's always going to be technology. The technology just isn't far enough along. And that's not to say that it won't get there. I think it will. I hope that I'm out of the game by the time that happens. But it's a slow burn on that one.
Excellent. And Brandon, where should people reach out to you if they'd like to learn more?
Well, so you can find more info about us at our website, which is just www.divergentlanguagesolutions.com. I believe if I advance the slide here, my contact info. Oh, there we go. It's already there. There's our general email address, which is divergent@divergentls.com. That goes to our entire company 24/7. And that is, again, going back to our clients need things perfect and they need them yesterday. And so that is monitored 24/7, and you will get a response within, during business hours, 2 minutes, during off hours, probably 15 to 20 minutes max. And that's just to really facilitate speed of execution. If someone's sending me a document, for instance, and I'm on a plane, I'm in a webinar, I'm dead in a ditch, somebody can respond to them immediately and get their project rolling, and it doesn't have to wait for, me to see it and respond. It's a very collaborative team approach. And so that's the best place to get us.
Fabulous. Well, we're at the top of the hour. We'd like to thank you, Brandon, and your company, our wonderful partner, Divergent Language Solutions, for making this webinar available to us. And many, many thanks to you, Virginia, for your wonderful insights and sharing your practices. And thank you to our EDRM community, as always, for your kind attention. We'll see you next time on the EDRM Global Webinar channel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary.